Yeah, thanks, Phil. Well, the violence in Iraq continues as Sunni Islamist militants threaten to take over Baghdad. Insurgents from an al-Qaeda offshoot called ISIS, or the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, overran several cities this week. They're trying to topple the government and establish their own state. Iraqi security forces are battling to stop the militants' southern march, less than 80 miles north of the capital. They're now calling for U.S. assistance. U.S. President Barack Obama says nothing is being ruled out as a possible response to the violence. And the oil markets are reacting to the chaos. Oil prices hit a 9-month high over concerns the violence could disrupt the region's supply chain. Iraq is the second largest OPEC producer. Most of Iraq's oil production and export facilities are in the country's south, however, far away from the violence. Analysts say key refineries could be in trouble if the militants reach Baghdad, but there's no sign this could happen soon. Now, for more on the impact of events in Iraq and elsewhere on global oil prices, we are joined by Kent Morris. He joins us in Pittsburgh. He's the founder and editor of Oil and Energy Investor, an investment advisory organization. Kent, thank you for joining us tonight. Let's talk about these global oil prices spiking up. Glad to have you. They spiked sharply today on these unfolding events in northern Iraq. Now, as we know, the main oil fields are on the south of the country. But from what you can tell right now, do you think Iraqi oil exports are in jeopardy?
Not at the moment, but the uncertainty is weighing very heavy on the global markets. We have a situation here where about 20% of the exports actually go from Kirkuk in the north by pipeline to Ceyhan in southeastern Turkey. That area is controlled by the Kurds, and those exports at the moment are not of primary concern. And even though the fields in which most of the exports arise, namely in the south, are far distant from either the current conflict or from the city of Baghdad, the difficulty is the uncertainty. If ISIS approaches Baghdad and if this paralyzes the government, the ability to continue production and exports in what amounts to a governmental power vacuum becomes very problematic.
Kent, but how are companies that do business in Iraq in the oil industry reacting to what's happening? Is there any threat that they might stop production?
Not at the moment, but needless to say, they're somewhat cautious. We did have some information this morning that one of the majors in the south, tasked under a contract to continue increasing production at a major mature oil field, was setting up contingencies to suspend their operations and to remove their personnel. But no company has yet acted on that. We do know that we have had American contract personnel north of Baghdad that have already been removed from the country. So some of these removal of personnel are beginning, but at the moment it has had no noticeable impact on either production or southern exports.
Okay, obviously something that you're going to be tracking very closely. But give us a sense of what percentage of the global oil market does Iraq actually represent? It's the second largest OPEC of the OPEC members in terms of production. But what percentage of the global market and what impact on prices would there be if supplies from Iraq were to be disrupted?
Well, it all depends on whose figures you accept, but this works out to be between 3 and 4% of the daily export production worldwide. But it's not the percentage, Karina. It is the perception of uncertainty in the market that tends to create difficulties. This is a very tight market. We've just had the International Energy Agency release another report expressing concern about sufficient supply becoming available for a continuing expansion of global demand. So any potential interruption of a major source anywhere in the world is likely to have disproportionate consequences for global traders.
Okay, now what about the fact that we're seeing that here in the U.S. at least, our shale oil, not exports, but we're producing a lot more, or getting a lot more output from shale oil. The fact that we're having that, why isn't that acting as a buffer more to the impact of geopolitical events around the world on the general oil market?
Well, to begin with, the shale revolution essentially, the shale oil revolution is essentially still a North American phenomenon. But keep in mind that less than 14% of the extractable shale oil worldwide is actually located in North America. So once the shale oil revolution really gets going, this is primarily going to be a drilling activity in areas other than the United States or Canada. We have to remember, however, this is still an integrated market. And people forget there are two essentially different questions that people continuously confuse. One is, how much is the oil going to cost me? What's the cost factor? And the second one is whether or not we're going to be secure in our sourcing. Well, until recently, that second issue was a primary concern in the United States because upwards to 70% of what we needed on a daily basis, we actually had to import from someplace else. Well, with the largesse of domestic, unconventional, tight, and shale oil supplies, that's no longer an issue. But the cost factor is likely to be increasing nonetheless. And the reason is this is an integrated world market. Any event that takes place anywhere in the world is going to have an impact virtually every other place in the market, whether the sourcing happens to be from that location or not.
Okay, Kent, just really quickly, we've got one more question left. How is the spike in oil prices going to affect prices at the pump this summer? You know, we've been hearing that we might get a bit of a break, drivers that is, but will this be rear-ended by events in Iraq?
Well, to give you one indication, Karina, the futures contract price for the NYMEX traded gasoline went up 8 full cents today. So we're looking at another spike here, and the longer that this crisis remains, we actually have two crises. We have the crisis in Iraq, we also have the ongoing crisis between Ukraine and Russia. The longer that these remain, that uncertainty is going to keep the prices high, and it's probably going to push them higher. All
right, not good for us drivers planning to head out this summer for a trip. Thank you so much, Kent, for joining us. That was Kent Moores, the founder and editor